Big Son.
What's going on, brother?
Hey, man.
Hey,
How
how
are
are
you?
you? Good. How are you?
Fantastic. Hold on one second here. We give it a minute. Let Facebook notify everybody. So many people, I'm sure, are going to be piling on this. That's
Right.
being that's being a little optimistic. But I always like to give it a minute, get everybody a chance to get on if they do want to watch. Obviously, they also can watch this. It'll be recorded and posted as well. So, but it's a special episode, take two of Windshield Live. We had a little technical difficulties last week when we were going to do this same episode, so I'm glad we were able to get it back on the schedule, and we'll crank through it here today. So I say it's special because I don't know if anybody who is watching or does watch can probably tell the amazing resemblance between both of us on this episode. But this excited to have my brother, Michael Downey Jr. join us. What's up?
Man, it's a good day. It's Friday, right? The sun's
Yeah.
out. It feels good out. So good weekend coming up.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. So one of the reasons that we kind of jump right into it that that you've been on some TV stations lately, some radio stations. You're kind of doing something pretty nutty, and at the high level, just to get right into it, you're running 50 marathons in 50 weeks. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That is it. Just running 50 marathons in 50 weeks. Obviously, besides just running, there's a point to it. We're trying to bring awareness to pediatric brain cancer research in coordination or in conjunction with Children's Hospital, and started December 29th of last year. So at least one a week since then, and I just finished Baltimore last Saturday, so I ended up that was the 42nd marathon. So number 43 is this weekend.
Good grief. We're going to obviously dive in on what the purpose obviously behind 50 marathons in 50 weeks. But let's backtrack here, because people don't just start running 50 marathons in 50 weeks, nor do they really just start running any marathon in any given time. At least I haven't. I get tired driving. What is it? 26.2 miles?
Yes, sir.
26.2 miles. And you're doing it once a week, every week. So let's back up though. When did you start? I mean, have you been a distance runner like your entire life? I mean, I kind of know the answer to that, but when did this running thing become thing?
That's an easy question. So when it comes to running, I have not done it. Well, I guess now it's getting longer and longer. So I'm going on 9 years. But what ended up happening is as the kids were starting to get older and I had more time on my hands. I mean, I'm not embarrassed to discuss it, but I deal with anxiety issues. So about 9 years ago, I was looking for a way to burn off that excess energy, and out of the blue, I just walked into the room, the great room or whatever you want to call it, and removed all the clothes off the treadmill, turned it on, and started walking. And then it's kind of just led to one thing after another. I mean, it helped tremendously with the anxiety, and then it just became something that just became a part of every day. And so like I said, so I didn't start running even if I bumped it up to 10 years. I didn't start running anything until I was 41. So I'll be
What was the first I got a couple questions for you. By the way, for anybody that does watch this, it's going to sound bad. Even though we're siblings, a lot of these questions I don't know the answer to. So as I mentioned to him when I was like, hey, I think we should do this. You're like, for what? And I'm like, well, one, want to bring awareness to Ella Strong, which everybody will talk more in a minute. But two is I actually don't know a lot of these answers. Were you you're going to laugh at me. What were you like physically when you started running? Like, I mean, were you in shape? Were you?
Oh, I looked like a bag of flour. I mean, when I first, when I first got on the treadmill and I ran my first, that's going back 9 years ago. I mean, I ran my first three marathons at 312 pounds.
Holy
So,
shit. I didn't
yeah,
know
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah, yeah. So when I first started walking on the treadmill, I was at 312, and it went in a cycle. I graduated from high school at 190. I got married at 240. I maxed out at 312, and then I figured I start running. so, when I first got on the treadmill, like I said, I was 312 pounds and had no idea what I was doing. So, I mean,
Good
you know,
grief.
yes,
I
yes,
didn't realize that.
yeah.
What was the first actual marathon you've run?
Um, I think we were looking it up the other night just to kind of, because I always tell people I haven't been running that long, but people say that 9 years is pretty long. In 2016, we did the rock and roll marathon in DC just to kind of see, if we could do it. And then I turned around and ran the because well, for those that don't know, our father was sick at the time, and his health was teeter tottering. So I thought it would be a cool idea. So I ran because he was a Marine or former Marine. Oh, I guess once a Marine, always a Marine. So we ran the Marine Corps marathon, and got dad down there. So it was good too. So that was my first and second. So both in DC. So I would say 9 years ago, 8 years ago.
And Jesus, that's a lot. And marathon, obviously the distance we talked about, but that's not the small. I mean, you've run some pretty what would be considered ultra, right? Type distance.
Oh yes, sir. I've done
What's the furthest?
the furthest I've ever ran is I've done 4 100-mile races. So I did three Yeti 100 races in Virginia, right by the Tennessee line, and then a couple years ago I ran the Outer Banks. So I ran from Kerala to Cape Hatteras. So that's the hundreds, and then the 50s. I mean, I'm probably not because I include some of those. I include long training runs. I've probably done like 10 or 12 50-milers.
Well, I was gonna be. What's the total like races you've done? Do you know? I've seen all the medals they like hang. I mean, you just kind of hang them on. You hang them
Yeah,
like
yeah,
keys by the
yeah.
door. It's hilarious.
No, you know what's funny, Joe? I'd have to go back and take a look. I mean, I could probably, like you said, think about them and rattle them off. But I mean, the first one I ever did is just because I thought it was cool and it was related to the military and the armed forces. As I ran the JFK 50-miler, and that is I guess one of the most or the oldest and most historic, and it kind of came out of a challenge from JFK to the military troops to try to get kids to, I guess, participate in exercise. So the challenge, 50 some years ago when they started it was to make, see if people could actually, run or walk 50 miles. So that was my first ever, dalliance into ultras. And I just thought it had a cool story behind it. So my first one was the JFK 50. I've since run that a couple times, but that was my first one ever. So
let's back up because one of the reasons I did want to talk to you, and I'm kind of grateful in advance that you're open to talking about it. When you say you kind of ran, from a mental aspect, obviously it looks like you've changed physically too, or sounds like you've changed physically too. If you started at 312 pounds 9 years ago, so that's always the benefit. But the real kind of motivator was, just anxiety.
oh, it was 100%. I mean, like I said, I'm kind of like an open book. I'm not afraid to discuss anything. So what I mean by that is I think on one of your previous podcasts you had, I call him, in my eyes he's famous. You
Yeah.
had a Dr. Harold Shinitsky. So not only is he a family, we've known him for years, but I'm, joking around, I'm also a client. So, I've always struggled with anxiety ever since I was a kid. And then it really kind of came to head at 18. So I started working with Dr. Shinitsky, and he never took anything personal. He always gave me advice and things to work on. Go figure. It took me 20 years to obviously say, hey, you know what? I'm going to try this exercise thing out. So yes, I have changed physically, but I'm not embarrassed or whatever to tell people that the first time I ever stepped on a treadmill had nothing to do with my physical appearance. It was trying to help me address my mental appearance.
Yeah.
So
What?
that's really how it started. And then when I started to feel so much better mentally, that's what kind of triggered me to say, hey, I kind of enjoy this and it's beneficial, but I'm still 312 pounds. So like I said, the diet and the distance running and the physical side was definitely secondary. It was more to help from the mental strength side and boost that up. There's two ways to technically get rid of it, I guess. As he would always tell me, you can either burn it off or quiet the mind. I've never really been good at quieting the mind, so I said, you know what, I'm going to try this burn off option.
Yeah.
And I started running, and then I always cracked a joke. I'm never going to win a race. So that's kind of how the whole evolution started. Is me and a couple buddies were sitting around and saying, hey, we're never going to win these things. So I wonder if we can just go farther, because I had no idea. I mean, I still remember running my first 10K and thinking that I would never get over the 6 mile hump. And then we did our first half and our first full, and a bunch of our friends said, hey, I'm good with that. And then me and a couple of my buddies were like, hey, they make 50 milers and 100 milers. We had no idea. So we literally just started looking online and kind of fell all in. So it became more of a mentally pushing yourself to go farther. So that's really how when people say, how'd you get into it? It was like, hey, they keep making these races at longer distances. I said, let's see what we can do. There's no
There's
theory behind it.
a couple things that you said that I want to deep dive on. They're both all over the place. First off, what happened to 18? That you mentioned 18 was, from an anxiety standpoint, was there something that happened? I'm assuming I know what it was, but I could be
No,
wrong.
you know what? And I apologize. I may have butchered the dates back when, back whenever I first started walking. Like I said, I've always been anxious, and we always go through our blips and our ebbs and our flows. I always noticed with me that the winter months when activities would slow down, it would always be worse. And at the time, my kids had just finished playing, 5 months of football and dance and all of that stuff. So I went from always going and going and going, which to me was a good distraction technique, to finally, the kids were like, hey, football's over, dance is over, basketball hadn't started yet. So I was just like, hey, you know what? For the first time, instead of waiting for it to kind of show up, I'm gonna, I'm gonna take the 20-year-old advice and see if walking on the treadmill will help.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I didn't know if it affected you. So 18, I thought was when. How old were you when Dad was first diagnosed with cancer? Weren't you?
Oh, you know what? Um, don't quote me. I was 18. I was a
Okay.
senior in high school. So I mean, I wasn't forgetting about that. I'm sure there was all kinds of triggers, but when I think about my anxiety, I I I can remember it, as a kid. I mean, I can remember it as like 5, 6, 7 years old, riding around with Dad, headed to the seafood store. And I remembered when I first went and talked to somebody about it. I would always tell people I would go through like 5-year cycles. Now, what triggered those 5-year cycles off? You're probably right on the money. Like when I was 14, I went through a bout of it, but I had also just gotten diagnosed with skin cancer, and I was trying to wrap my head around that, because in my mind the word cancer, at 14 to me was a death sentence.
Yeah.
So then I kind of went joking around. I went through like a couple good years, and then as um, my senior year in high school, so I was 18 or getting ready to just turn 18. Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, so I'm sure that kind of threw a loop into it. And then getting out and trying to go to college for the first time, dad being sick for that year or so, it was probably just a whole lot. So I'm not in, when you think about it, yeah, I definitely had some valid trigger points, but I just look at the total. I guess I look at the total timeline, and I just remember, like I said, being a young kid and just being anxious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just got a message from a friend. They were like, I thought you were in fourth grade when your dad was diagnosed. I was like, yeah, Mike's a lot older than me.
Yes, I
Don't
am.
let it fool you.
Yeah. The only reason why my beard doesn't look grayer than yours is because I shaved it for this interview.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
But
The
no,
you brought up a good
for
oh,
those that
go
are
ahead.
watching or care, yeah, I'll be
Yeah.
51. I'll be 51 at Christmas, and I'm the oldest boy, and uh, Joe here is, Joe is the youngest.
Yeah.
The baby of the Downey family, if we want to say that. So yeah,
That's
there's definitely some years between us.
That's it. That's it. The other thing you talked about, I think, is critical for. I think this group benefits from it because you talked about, hey, you're not going to technically win by the scoreboard any of these races, but I mean, there's got to be a level of what I would consider winning. Just the fact that you prepare for them and then compete in them.
Oh, I think it's not trying to sound too melodramatic. I think like races like that or anything in that wheelhouse to me is kind of like a microcosm of life because you kind of go through it and something new pops up. You know what I mean? Like you could go out today and it could be a cramp, it could be nausea, it could be, some people go through really long races and they hallucinate. I mean, I think you never really know what to expect, kind of like with life. But I think, like you said, when it starts swinging, or beating you down or whatever, whether it's running or just in general, to me, it's
Yeah.
kind of like it kind of like resembles it because at some point in time, you gotta get on it and push through, whether you feel like it or not.
Brings
You
up
know,
a good point. I would assume when you first started it, there was like this motivation to do 50 in 50 weeks. And that kind of eventually, I'm assuming, I don't want to speak for it, but I'm assuming that motivation starts to dissipate. And then it becomes a matter of just commitment and recommitment week in and week out. How do you get yourself up every what 5 or 6 days and to say I got to run another 26 point whatever miles?
I think like with anything, like you said, whether it's joking around or not joking around, whether it's work, whether it's a family issue, whether it's friends, I think you surround yourself with good people. Like I said, I'd love to come on this thing and tell you that I wake up every Saturday and drink my coffee, I snap my fingers, and I go out. I mean, there's a group of people that are, my tight buddies, including my wife, but I got two good friends, and they catch the brunt of it. Like I'll call them or text them and say, hey, really not feeling it on Saturday? Or, hey, it's Sunday, I'd rather sleep in. And they're quick to say, yeah, okay, great. I'll see you in 20 minutes. And then you just kind of, snap out of it.
That's
A couple weeks ago, just because I know we'll get into it. I think it was like September 15th. My wife, Nancy, came down the stairs and she said, "What are you doing?" And I had said, "I'm not going." And she said, "What?" I said, "I'm not going. I'll make it up. I'll do it at some other time." And she said, "Oh, okay." I said, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Well, today was 2 years ago today. Ella died." And she just let it
oh,
sit there. She just let it sit there. So the group, not that changed my excitement about it, but it changed my perspective. So although I went out and I was probably cussing and hollering, it changed it and said, "Hey," just kind of changes the perspective and said, "Hey, it's time to go out there and get it done."
Was that the weekend? I think you had told me. Was that the one where you'd start? Did you start one pretty late, like on a Saturday or Sunday night, and had to run through the middle of the night to get it
Yes.
done?
Yes.
Holy! How long's an average marathon, or how long's when one of these take?
Well, for me, I've done them anywhere from 3 hours and 58 minutes to 7 hours.
Yeah,
So there's depending on where you're at, like I said, a lot of my buddies really love trail running and things like that. So to mix up the sights and the sounds, we'll go running in the woods. But, joking around, I'm old. So that elevation and terrain kind of drives, how fast or slow I'm going to go. So, you
oh,
know, when you're getting out there and you see a big old hill, I'm like, all right, it's not going to be as fast as I thought it was.
What do you think the kind of the key? You just keep going, just one step in front of the other. What do you like? What goes through your mind? I mean,
Man, if I told you what went through my mind, I'd have to go back to church. You know what? A lot of stuff goes through my mind. Like I said, it's pretty much for this time. It's like it's cyclical. At least with me, the first couple miles, you're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And then your body kind of gets loosened up, and your mind gets loosened up. Great company and people with you definitely take your mind off of it. And then you just kind of settle in, and you wait to see what's going to come at you from the run perspective, or what the day's events. So I guess you spend a lot of time preparing, and then you get all that preparation out, and then you kind of get into it. You know what I mean? Because it could be you try to control the controllables, but you get out there, and all of a sudden you get a foot issue, a hot spot, chafing. So you're like, hey, that didn't happen last week, and then you kind of go into regroup mode to make sure that you're addressing everything and keep going. So yeah, so I would say from that standpoint, that's kind of always like been the way. You got the pre-thought process, and then you get into it, and then of course everything you've thought about, a lot of it either doesn't come true or something is brand new that you didn't even think about. So like I said, you could wear the same shoes, the same socks, and then all of a sudden one day it says, hey, I'm going to give you a nasty blister, or I'm going to give you a pain in your calf, and you're like, where did that come from?
Do you listen to anything? What do you do?
Yes. Well, I've run a full like a gamut, and I'm just now getting back into it. I go everywhere with music, everywhere, and then it turned into podcasts and books and things like that. But then years ago, I'm trying to say it so I don't sound too ignorant. When you're out there, I don't like hearing all the people talk. So like crowded races, I'm like, I just want to, joke around. I just want to sit in my own, whatever. So I always had music. And then the first JFK 50 miler, they said, hey, we're a very nostalgic historical race. You can't have any headphones on. If we catch you with the headphones or whatever, you'll be disqualified. So I was like, I completely panicked. I'm like, wait, I've been doing everything with these earphones on. And then it kind of brought you into a new side of like trail running or ultra running. Cause then as you're going through it, and the first one I ran was the night after like a snowstorm, it was like single track. So people are just going by and you're hearing people talk. And I'm like, okay, that's not as bad as I thought. So then you start to, learn about people and see where they come from, and, what they're dealing with, what they're not dealing with, how they got involved. So then I kind of went out where it was just more of like a, just out and about doing my thing. But I would say here with this every week, I'm definitely all back into the, the music. I mean, I leave the house with 3 or 4 different sets of headphones to make sure the batteries are charged. I've got playlists, of all different varieties to just kind of change it up.
Yeah, I remember there's been a time I accidentally called you during one and you picked up, which was kind of interesting to think about, talking on the phone while you're in misery. I mean, I assume again, when you're running, it's not like it's pain-free and it's fun. Maybe it is. I don't know.
No, it's not. And it's not something where like I'm like screaming like woe is me, but you're always gonna have something. I mean, over the summer, and of course I crack jokes, I'm probably wrong, but to me it was one of the hottest and most humid summers that we've had in a long time. So like when you're out there, running, and let's say you're losing like 11, 12 pounds of fluid, and you can only put in so much back in. I mean, when it's over, you're watching your legs twitch, you're voiding off cramps. I mean, you're sucking down pickle juice, to try to, and you're drinking as much as you can without upsetting your stomach, and, making it sure where you don't get sick. But, the heat and humidity throws something in there. There's always, elevation and terrain where you're going. So there's always something new to challenge. But yeah, I mean, I'm also, joking around. You're the youngest. I'm not the youngest. Yeah, I'm not the youngest one out here. So,
Yeah.
my body eventually starts feeling it.
What do you think? Would you rather run in when it's colder, when it's hotter? Like, is there any like that you're like, oh, this is from a climate standpoint?
Oh, yes, sir. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You will not hear me complain. I hope sometime between now and December 7th, when I'm running these marathons, that one of them's in a snowstorm.
Really?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love running in the cold. I mean, I know it sounds goofy. The way I look at it is you can always do something to get warmer. When it gets to be 90, 95, and 93% humidity, there's nowhere for that stuff to go. You know what I mean? And I'm being funny. There's only so
Sure.
many clothes you can take off before somebody calls the cops.
Good point.
So I'd rather be in the cold.
Yeah, that would make sense. I'm sure in the beginning it sucks.
Yeah, yeah, but you kind of, like I said, ease into it. As long as my upper body, my buddy John and Tommy, they give me a hard time. I got this old beat up green jacket, and it's like my security blanket. And as long as my upper body, if I have that on and a pair of gloves at least around just to keep your fingertips warm until your body heats up, my lower body has always, I guess, probably because you're running, but I mean, even all last winter, I never wore like, tights or leggings. I always wore shorts. So, but like I said, just weird things. As long as my hands are warm and my body doesn't have like a chill on the upper side, I'm good, and I prefer it that way.
Jeez. I don't even know. I was thinking about this. You don't chew anymore, do you?
No, but knowing where you're headed with that, believe me, it went. You know, if people are going to show this to their kids, mute this part out. When I was training for my first, 100 or 50 miler, Nancy can't believe that I came up with this idea, but I was jogging and I said, "Hey, I wonder if I can run with a dip in."
Yeah.
And it was joking around, it was the greatest run of my life. So until I quit, I ran. I tell people all the time, if you find me, joking around dead in the woods, I'm gonna have one thing on me, and it's gonna be Copenhagen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It went with me
Yeah.
everywhere. I mean, I had spare rolls in my vest, and people would be like, "Have you been chewing this whole time?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" In my head, I'm like, "Yeah, why not?"
Yeah.
And they're looking at me. So unfortunately, I got really good at it, and then I just, I guess going on like 8, 9 months ago, I said, "All right, that's enough." But yeah, no, it was unfortunately, like I said, it's not a positive comment, but yeah, I used to run with it, and it went with me everywhere.
So some of this group knows because I'm pretty transparent. How did I we had a pretty awesome upbringing at the end of the day, but we definitely faced our fair share of adversity. You talked about dad being diagnosed with cancer with pretty grim outlook at the time, which that's a whole nother episode on him.
Yep.
And then it was December will be 5 years that he passed away ultimately. And then 2 days later, John, our brother, middle brother, passes away. Has that Did that change anything? Did that affect anything with, mentally that, you can then kind of channel that into your running or
Yeah, I think as a reminder, I mean, and like I said, we're not trying not to be morbid. I approach a lot of things cracking jokes. So if people listen to this and they say, "Hey, man, that's a lot of jokes," Dad, Dad kind of waved the green flag for like the Death 500.
yeah,
You know what I mean? What I mean by that is, I mean, since Dad passed away 5 years ago, family, friends, like good family, friends, or family, I
yeah,
think we lost. I think we got into like 14 or 15 funerals.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So I say
People
all
stop
that.
taking your phone call. I think you know that.
A
People
lot of people, and
yeah,
you aren't the only one. There was a lot of people out there said, "Text me before you call," because when you call, but
it's not good.
No, but and it stinks. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I guess it's the only guarantee in life, but I think from the anxiety perspective or the mental side of it is it kind of puts everything in perspective. And what I mean by that is you can worry about all kinds of stuff and you can come up with all these scenarios about what could go wrong and plan everything. And you never know. And then you see people that lived good lives, long lives, great lives, short lives, and it just kind of is, snatched or goes away. I kind of took the choice to look at it and say, okay, I mean, eventually that's going to be all of us someday. But
Yeah.
instead of worrying about, every other thing of when it could happen, I mean, it kind of changes perspective and saying, hey, if tomorrow is, if tomorrow is given, we might as well go out and take it for all it's worth, or do whatever we can. Cause like I said, you'll never really know when. I mean, so I would
Yeah.
say it changed that dynamic as you see all these people in our family and friends and, loved ones that have passed away. And you're just like, okay, knowing that, you know, that is probably the only end goal that's promised. I always tell myself, well, and I'm not saying I'm great at it. I still work at it every day, but I'm like, hey, instead of worrying about it or thinking about everything this way, let's just go out and do what we can, control what we can control, and you know, uh, deal with deal with the way the hand that we're dealt.
Yeah. No, that's something you do better than most, and that I've experienced is, just face it and work through it and control, like you said, control what you can control is
Well,
you're better at it again. I think that's why probably everybody comes to you first with the bad news and then go deliver it. You're really good at controlling emotion, which is
first of
critical.
all, I mean, I appreciate that. I've thought about it a lot. I think the one thing that I've noticed, and obviously it's been, I'm being funny, it's been years, working with Doc. I'm like, a lot of times the stuff that get all worked up about are like what ifs. They're make believe. I mean, they're perceived in my brain,
Yeah.
but yet when real life comes or real things hit, I mean, that's what's one of the biggest dynamics about
Yeah.
anxiety. It's because you're like, hey, I'm over here worried about, joking around. I'm over here worried about what's underneath my bed at night. And then you're like, yeah, but look at this. You did A, B, and C. So you
Yeah.
start it helps you deal with, the mental side of it or the anxiety side of it because it kind of puts it in perspective going, that you get worked up about a lot of things that are self-generated. But like you said, when the proverbial poop hits the fan, you kind of go out and do it. And um, it's helped me. It's not like saying, hey, oh, look at me, I'm tough. But it's definitely stopped and said, hey, I can do all of these things when it hits the fan. So why are we worried about stuff
Yeah.
that hasn't even hit the fan yet? I know.
Good. There's
So
a lot of people that may not raise their hand at that, but they're sitting there going, "Yeah, that's me. That's me." Do you hit
that's
a? Do you ever hit like a? What do they call it? They've talked about, people talk about the runner's high. Is there ever like like
oh,
at any point, 26.2 miles, any point that you're like, I don't know, in a flow state, in a I don't endorphin shoot up, you feel like you could
yeah.
just go?
I mean, I'll say I do, but when I say I do, like I don't have any scientific evidence. Like there's a joke amongst me and Nancy just gets stuck with the joke and she gets tired of hearing it.
Yeah.
But me, my buddy Tommy, and my buddy John, if we're out running, it kind of flows. Like there'll be times where I'm like, hey, this is horrible. And then literally like 10 miles later, our ongoing joke is this is not even a sport. Like, who trains for this? Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like so there are times where you definitely feel good. You're going along, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that have run next to us or heard us walking. They're like, these guys are a bunch of idiots because me and him are just feeding off each other. Like, who even thinks this is tough?
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But we're obviously cracking jokes. Because then, like 3 minutes, 3 miles later, we're like, hey man, this is the worst idea we've ever had. So I can definitely tell that my body has my body cycles through. The only time I can remember that was just wild is when I trained for my first 100 miler. A buddy of ours that was helping us train, he said, hey, if you do what I tell you, he said, if you do what I tell you, when you get to like mile 85, you are going to be on it and you'll just start reeling people in. And I'm like, there's no chance. And if you would have seen me at mile 51, you would have said, hey, there's no chance. I tell you what, I don't know if it was psychosomatic or whatever, but it's 85 miles, 87 miles. I'm in the woods in the dark, and it was like a light switch went off. He had called me. It was like 3:00 in the morning. He was like, oh, you're getting ready to get into it. And the next thing you know, it was like, boom. And I just started going.
Yeah.
And like you said, catching people. So I would say besides the normal ebbs and flows, there's only one time that, like I said, that 85 miles into my first 100-mile was like, hey, it's time to roll. And the body was just there. The mind was there, and he wasn't lying. At least
do you do like, so, there's a lot of, ultra running and stuff has become pretty popular. You see a bunch of guys, a couple of them you and I have talked about, Chad Wright, those guys, a lot of ex special forces. Or do you have any do you get all fired up? Like, you're not running down the road screaming, who's going to carry the boats, are you?
No.
Are you, you're just chill? Here's my question. Do you have your own self-talk? Like, you got this? Like, because sometimes I know I've texted you during them and I'm going, I don't know if he's into it like this or he's not. Like,
no, I go through, and it's probably not a good thing. I go through things, and I tell people all the time, and like I said, it's probably not beneficial. I get angry, and it's weird, man. I strive off that anger. And like I said, it's not beneficial. I'm sure people say, hey, that's not a good theory, but like, I'll go. And like the other night we were talking about that Chad guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It is a horrible thing to say, but like if you're in a big race and you see somebody up ahead and they're struggling, man, I hate to say it, it's like motivation. It's like reeling them in. Obviously you stop and say, hey, you good?
Yeah.
And then you say, yeah, but it's like when you go past them, you're like, hey, that's,
yeah.
So like I said, I'm not the guy that walks up and like kicks you down a hill. But like you said, if joking around, if they're like, hey, I'm struggling, I'm like, all right, man, keep it up. But then it's kind of like, yeah, but guess what? I'm still moving.
Yeah.
I'm still moving. So a lot of
versus going, I can't do this, I'm not going to make it. I'm assuming it's just one step in front of the other. Or do you count the miles down? Or you just focus like what, 1 mile at a time? Is there?
I used to be that way, and then I got out of it. And then just here recently, because like I said, to me, my best ultra marathon or whatever was the first one, because you didn't know what to expect. Now that you kind of know what's out there and the demons that lurk around the corner, it definitely becomes a bigger mental game. So like, I love talking to people that have said, oh, I've run 50 or 60 of these things. I'm in all of that. I'm in all of that, even if you told me you walked backwards or skipped, because you're still going to go through that mental struggle. And the fact that those people can say, hey, I know it's out there, I'll probably butcher her name. You think I'd know it better, but there's a female ultra runner who's probably the best in the business, and her name is Courtney Dowalter. And she kind of invented the phrase, the pain cave. And she's like, I used to be afraid of it, but now I embrace going into it and seeing what I can do to make, to deal with everything. And that to me is fascinating, because it's coming, whether you're big like me, old, young, eventually, regardless of what it is, you're going to get into the pain cave. And then it becomes, to me, a mental fight to go, okay, I got to do this. I got to eat more. I got to drink more. I got to keep moving. So to me, that is the most fascinating part, that the people that can do it and kind of readjust and reassess and say, hey, I'm going to keep on getting it. And because I think I've probably heard it. I've heard it from Doc. I've heard it in Goggins. They call it like the 40% rule.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it true to you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I'll even say with me, I could go around the corner at any one of these marathons and say, hey, I'm done. I can't do it anymore physically. And then all of a sudden you look around the corner and you see that finish line. And then next thing you know, you're jogging and then
Yeah.
it builds up to like a fast, whatever. So it's just, even if it's just a short blip, it's saying, hey, when your mental perspective changes, it's letting your body know, hey, you just told me that you were cramped up, you couldn't walk, and the next thing you know, you're sprinting towards the finish line like you just started. And people are like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
You know, mentally, I can't remember which one. I did it again after John had passed away, and they call it the Wetty Yeti because we ran it in this rainstorm, and I met a guy, a special forces guy. Now he was beat up physically. I was beat up mentally. So we kind of like met, and we walked, ran, shuffled 40 miles together. And we still to this day are incredible friends. But I remember, like you said, we got to the point of the bridge where you could see the finish line, and I knew he was physically busted. And I said, hey, man, we got to jog it in. And he goes, I can't. And then I started jogging. And then, of course, he proceeded to cuss me out. He's like, oh, you've been holding out on me.
Yeah.
He's like, you've been sandbagging. And I'm like, but like I said, mentally, I just couldn't get myself back in it, whether I wasn't feeling well. I mean, I was still moving, which is good. But like you said, you see something and it changes your whole perspective. And then you just go about your business.
What are you gonna do? Are you have any like forward thinking past this? First off, 50 marathons, 50 weeks. I can't say that enough because that's just insanity. But after that, I mean, it doesn't. You're not gonna just stop running? I don't foresee.
No. Well, I've already been sworn that any great ideas that I come will be a group vote
Yeah.
within the family, because I came up with this one on my own while I was out running. So no, you know what? I've told a lot of people in the past week, and maybe I'm saying it wrong, but this is my interpretation, is when you got to go out and do the marathon every week, it's just, you got to do what you got to take to get it done.
Yeah.
So I tell you all that because I would probably tell you I'm in poor cardiovascular shape. So when I think about next year, I would like to almost go back and start over. I'm just 1, 2, 3 miles where I'm just, working to build up my cardiovascular, capabilities. Because like I said, right now, you're like, hey, it doesn't matter how fast or slow you're going or how you feel, you just got to get it done.
Yeah.
So a lot of that, has set in. And I think right now, the only thing on my mind is to go back and say, okay, I'm just going to, reset.
Yeah.
So that would be it. What that looks like, I've got a couple buddies that are running some crazy races in February and March, and I'll go down and help them and, hang out. But I don't really have anything, no crazy ideas right now on the books for 2025, except just keep moving forward.
No, it's fair enough. Speaking of the 50-50, it was driven by what we have in the corner of the screen here, Ella Strong. Let's talk about it before we go. Wanted to talk to you today because I knew there was a mental side to this that I really think everybody listening will benefit from. But obviously, there also is this side of the motivation for this particular challenge you set for yourself. And again, we reference it as Ella Strong, but for everybody that doesn't really know, fill us in on what's going on there.
Yeah. So we have a cousin whose daughter, heck, what is it now? It's been almost 3.5 years. She was diagnosed with a very aggressive pediatric brain cancer called medulloblastoma. And it was 2 years ago in September. She passed away. She was treated at Children's Hospital. So when you just start to look at everything, just children in general, the amount of funding and research that they get for cancers is really pathetic. I mean, I hate to say that. Like, there's a focus on adults. There's a focus on, this and the other thing. So when it came up, is like you said, last year, I knew she was treated like a princess at Children's Hospital and unfortunately passed away there. And they have a great pediatric brain cancer research facility. So last year around this time, I said, well, heck, I'm turning 50 on Christmas Day. So I literally said, hey, I'm going to run 50 marathons in 50 weeks to raise money for Children's Hospital. And Ella's mom, her name is Megan, and I actually called her while I was out running, and I floated the idea, and she said, "Are you out running?" I said, "Yeah." Then I called Nancy, and she said, "Let's talk about it when you get home." And then it just kind of, once I come up with something, Nancy said, "Hey, I know you're not going to stop, so as long as you go to the doctor and they tell me that you're not gonna, something
Yeah.
crazy is gonna happen." So it just kind of, that's how it started. But it's obviously to raise money for medulloblastoma. Megan reached out to me a couple weeks ago, and Children's has agreed that all of the money that is raised through this fundraiser will specifically go to clinical trials for children that have had relapsed medulloblastoma. So all pediatric cancer is horrible, but it kind of gives you motivation to know that what you're doing is actually going to go, to the cause that,
Yeah.
affected her family, and still, probably still affects it. But anyway, so December 29th of last year, I went out and ran my first one, and it's been, it's been going. And like I said, I'll do number 43 this weekend. But that's where the whole
Yeah.
thing came from. And then the campaign on Children's Hospital is called Ella Strong. And then, obviously, I just did a play on words. Instead of marathons, I call each one that I run an Ellathon.
Ah,
Yeah. So Ellathon 43 is this Sunday.
holy crap. That's that. So let me make sure I'm right. By the way, I put a link in the post that we're on, so people can link directly to Children's for that, which obviously is greatly appreciated. It's 26.2
Yes, sir.
times 50, so you've 1,310 miles.
Yes, sir. If I got it right, I was looking at it last week, and I think I just crossed over the 1,100 mile threshold. So, the final 200, which would make sense because I'm at 8 left. So it'll
Yeah,
be, yeah. So, yeah, 1,100 miles so far. It'll be 1,300, 1,300 miles run when it's all said and done with December 7th.
nice.
Yes.
Well,
So,
my challenge is going to be for any of our friends in the group that listen to the call. I hope they do, even if it's on the replay. So, in talking with Marnie, we've decided to do $1 per mile. So we're going to donate $1,310 to the Ella Strong Fund. We actually had decided on doing that a while back, but hadn't gotten around to it yet. So wanted to make sure you were getting close. Didn't want to count you out.
I understand. I understand. And
So
first of all, let me say thank you. I know that you had told me that you were gonna, joking around. You said, "Hey, I'm gonna wait and make it right." So
yeah,
I can't thank you enough. That's called making it. That's definitely making it right. So,
I
I
hope
was looking at it the other
I
day.
hope a lot of our listeners that can do whatever they can do, really. But
Oh,
there are a few that I would challenge to hopefully match me on that if they can, not just for Ella, but for all the kids. Marnie and I've experienced, you want to talk about perspective. You take a walk through the halls of Children's, or in our case, it's Hopkins with Teddy and the neurological side of things. And Teddy deals with what our brother ultimately lived with uh, with seizures, and any of that at any level, it sucks as a parent to see your kid go through it. But what it does put in perspective is when you see a child that ours can still walk, talk, breathe on their own. When you see a child that can't any of those things, and you start to realize, oh my gosh, or you start to realize that some of these kids probably aren't going to be leaving like we are in a day or two.
right.
We've been there, and it's Ella. I've heard all the stories, and Ella Strong, I think, is an appropriate kind of hashtag for it, because she did show some insane strength and resilience, and you're doing that now with the running. So,
Or you think
um,
about it. I mean, I know you
yeah,
think about it, like between her surgeries. I mean, she had to teach herself how to walk again. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like, you're talking about like 14 years old. You're thinking about homecomings and getting your license. Yeah, she's, and no kid, but like I said,
Yeah.
because it's our family. I mean, you're watching a young lady that's got to teach herself how to move, and what's crazy about it is always had a smile on her face. Was
Yeah.
always about pushing through. You know what I mean? Be smile, smile, be courteous, and you're like, man. I mean, like I tell people all the time. People say you're, joke around and say you're crazy. I'm like, I got an easy, I got the easy job.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe when I'm out doing it, I don't sound like it. But when
Yeah.
you put it in the grand scheme of things, that's 1,300 miles that there's kids all over the world that will never be able to walk in their lifetime. Even if it's just
Yeah.
around the playground. I'm not saying run. I'm just saying that's
Yeah.
1,300 miles that I get to do for somebody or to help somebody, maybe get, a couple extra hundred. Hey, maybe it's 1,300 or,
Yeah.
whatever. But, I mean, so when people say, hey, you're nuts, I'm like, yeah, maybe I am. But, when you look at it, it's like mine is, what I'm doing to help out or raise awareness. It's to me, it's easy. Like
Yeah.
I said, now, if you're with me during it, I'll probably tell you it's not easy, but I'm just saying when you're level headed at the end of it, you're like, hey, this is when things start to tighten up, you're like, oh, I'm good. I'm good
Yeah.
on that. You know
In
what
the
I mean?
grand
So,
scheme of things.
but
Uh,
also too, the one thing I wanted to bring up just to
yeah.
so it's not looking for sympathy. So I guess 2 Fridays ago, go figure. I was putting together some furniture, doing some very manual labor. I was putting together some furniture in the backyard, and I got back spasms for a week. Um,
Oh,
so I missed that weekend. So what we've decided to do is, and I think I've invited you and anybody else that's interested, is we're gonna do a double marathon on the track at the local high school.
oh, nice.
Yeah, November 16th. So
Okay.
I've invited people if they want to come hang out. Um, Nancy has established. I should have done better preparation. Nancy established a deal with a shoe return company. So if people bring their running shoes, we
Oh,
get so
sweet.
much. Yeah, we get so much per pound, and then that'll go to Ella Strong. And then, like you said, if somebody, anybody, it doesn't matter if it's 10 cents. If somebody wants to sponsor a lap, a
Yeah.
mile, a half a mile, the whole thing. Like I
Yeah.
said, it doesn't. I'm not here to say, hey, it's only $1. No, $1 is better than no dollars. We're getting close to, with your donation right now, we're getting close to $40,000 raised.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yes, sir. I'm not playing games.
Oh, whoa, I didn't.
No, I mean, the Ella Strong campaign is right around. I think it's like 38 something. So I'm joking
Yeah.
around with your,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
you had
Yeah.
just pledged. You know what I mean? So at this point in time, like I said, the next 8 weeks, and I'm not going to stop advocating for it, but people are going to get tired of me over the next 8 weeks saying, "Hey, it doesn't matter. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's $1 or a pair of tennis shoes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whatever it is, because it all goes to the Ella Strong campaign, and that's really what this started out. And the closer I get, the more amped up I get. Not about being done, but now spreading the word.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's I didn't realize that. That's awesome. And yeah, there's a lot of ways you can go about raising money, and to sit there and say, I'm gonna run 50 marathons in 50 weeks. Like, I'm gonna put my kind of, on the line here a little bit.
yeah, and
Versus
not that anybody's ever brought it up, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying this to like look for credit, but anything that's raised goes directly to Ella Strong. So any race that I've run, being funny because people are like, "Oh, how much is this cost?" Any
yeah,
race that I'm
right.
running, any shoes that I bought, any overnight stays, I'm doing that. I
Yeah.
want to make sure that if it's $1 coming out of your pocket, it's going to, Ella Strong. It's going to these kids. So like I said, people are like, how are you doing that? Well, I mean, I guess I've been fortunate enough, my wife has a good job. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
Well, you
So
are 34 for a reason, brother.
yeah,
So
I am
let's
34%. Yeah.
there's a reason.
So yeah, so like I said, that's another thing I'm really excited about. It's like when you look at that, that fundraiser, there's not $1 going to any cost or any overhead or anything changed except for helping these clinical trials to hopefully give these kids another chance.
Holy crap, that is awesome. Because I was realizing at some of the marathons you've run, I didn't realize that you actually pay to run marathons. I didn't like to me, it's like, oh no, you got to pay to run the Marine Corps, pay to. I'm like, I mean, I get it. It makes sense. It's for their thing. So that's pretty insane. Plus, I'm assuming you've gone through multiple pairs of shoes with this. So those, all
The
of them.
kids still to this day crack a joke because I probably have like 9 of the same model at the back door. They're all just different colors, and Michael's like, "So we just gonna keep buying the same shoe?" And I'm like, "Hey, son, it works." You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It works. They're just different, crazy colors, but yeah, no, it's yeah, they do cost money. I mean, not some of those ultra marathons cost several $100.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you figure you got to get there, and these people that you ask people to come help you. So then you're like, hey man, you feel bad that they're
Yeah.
doing that they're helping out, and then like I said, hotels and stuff like that. But it's all, I mean, one thing I'll say, Joe, that community is nothing but great because they'll support you and push through it and help you get through it. So it's it's been fun. So that's where we're at.
That's awesome. And that's true though. The link that I shared at least takes you right to children's.
Yes,
It's
yes,
not a
no,
GoFundMe.
I'm
It's not it's all directly to children's, which is awesome. That's always, I know something you and I've talked about before because we've had, you just want to be like, hey man, I just want the money. Like, this is what it's for.
yeah.
I don't want anything involvement other than me running.
I don't want anybody saying, "Hey, I gave you $1 last week." Like I said, we created the link, or Megan created the link. Savannah
Awesome.
created QR codes, so it's like, hey, this will take you directly there. I'm not, from that standpoint, I'm not involved. It is all going to children's, and
That's great.
let's make. I tell people all the time now. It's just time to let's make it happen.
Dude, well, you're doing it 42 on to 43 this weekend.
Yes, sir.
We'll
43
do
this weekend. I leave out. So 43 this weekend will be local. Next weekend, I'm in Ocean City. Then I'm gonna go run one in State College.
oh,
Uh,
nice.
yeah. So the following weekend, we're going up for the Whiteout game. I'll run one in State College, and then come back and do the double at the track. And then
Awesome.
at that point in time, it's 3 more to go. So if all goes well, I tell people that all the time. I mean, I'm gonna finish.
Yeah.
But the Rehoboth Marathon, December 7th, will be number 50.
That's awesome. Well, we'll do maybe we'll do something live either from there or shortly after again to kind of bookend this, and probably should have done it sooner. But I appreciate your time, brother.
Hey man, I truly appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
You bet. You bet. And again, hopefully everybody can see or click on the link at the bottom when they do watch this, and whatever you can add or donate would be great. And we'll continue to keep this group involved around it. And I think there's a ton of nuggets that we covered today that'll really are important for everybody outside of what you're trying to drive awareness for in this with Ella Strong. So hopefully it's worth everybody's time. But I appreciate you giving us your time, man.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you having me, Joe.
Sounds good.
All
See
right,
ya.
buddy. Yep.